Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Off-Farm Income Podcast. Thank you very much for joining us here today for episode number 780. Well, really appreciate you being here on our YouTube channel, and today we are going to talk about hauling, silage, building a business, and a lot of things that go into building lasting business relationships in farm country. A gentleman named Dan Frank is coming to us from northern Iowa, southwestern Wisconsin. He's going to be talking to us all about how he's been building his business and where it is going from here. We'll get that started for you right now. Dan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You bet. I want to say thank you to you for being a listener to the show and for reaching out to me to tell me your story. I think it's great.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and you do a very good job. I enjoy listening to it.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. And let's do this. I'd love to have you just introduce yourself to our audience. Let everybody know where you're from and kind of a little bit of your story.
Okay, I'm Dan Frank. I'm married. We just had our firstborn in October, and I'm from Dubuque, Iowa, just south. We live on 2 acres, and I originally come from this area. My wife, her parents farm a 500-cow dairy. Myself, I'm a trucker by trade, just trying to break it into entrepreneurship. You know, I enjoy the freedoms of being my own boss. I've enjoyed this area, and I really enjoy what I do. That's the main thing there.
Yeah, that certainly is the main thing, and I think that kind of epitomizes everything we're doing on the show, which is we're trying to give people some tool or some advice or something that can enable them to live the lifestyle that they really want to live. So, entrepreneurship is the way we get that done here on this show, at least.
Yep.
Okay. Well, very interesting. Now, you've got a really significant backstory, and congratulations on the new. Is it son or daughter?
Son.
Oh, well,
James.
Congratulations. That's wonderful. And so you've got quite a backstory. Kind of tell us that how things have unfolded for you growing up in agriculture and becoming an entrepreneur and what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, as a young kid, my dad was a butcher, and I guess I'll even start earlier. My grandpas both kind of farmed. My mom's dad, he was a cattle jockey, and they milked cows and were beef farmers. And my dad's dad, by the time he came along, he was a little older gentleman, and they embraced the small life or the small farming lifestyle. Dad grew up on like a 20-acre farm. They did a lot of gardening, and my grandpa on my dad's side worked at the sales barn, so they always had cattle and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came along, my dad was a butcher, but he really loved the farming life, so he did a lot of relief milking. And as I was growing up, I always liked to tag along and be in the barn with the cows, and I got plenty of enjoyment out of that. And so as we continued to grow up, my parents were strong believers in keeping us in 4-H, and we had sheep for a while, and lifelong member of 4-H for 13 years, and we raised rabbits. We got into the rabbit breeding, and that led us down a very interesting road. We learned a lot about everything you need to know about genetics, and we started a herd from a bunch of crossbred rabbits, and by the time I graduated 4-H, we had a herd of about 20 breeding does. And mind you, we lived in town, so we had to kind of keep our numbers low.
Mm-hmm.
But we, out of them crossbred rabbits, we transitioned to purebred New Zealand's. And by the time we were done, we had the grand champion meat rabbit came out of our herd for the last 10 years at the county fair.
Oh, wow.
So
10 years in a row?
Yeah, 10 years. Even last couple of years, My youngest sister graduated 4-H, so they've been kind of backing off. But even when my younger sisters were in, it came out of our herd. It might not have always been us owning it, but it came out of our herd. So that was quite an accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I really appreciate my parents for, teaching us that skill set. I guess it's a talent to take something from the ground and build on it. But yeah, so as a kid growing up, we were always active in 4-H, and we never lived on a farm. So we lived in a farming community. So I always had friends that had farms, or I worked on a lot of different farms, milking cows, and I just really loved the life, and I wanted to try to do it myself, but it's a struggle to get started if you don't have something to inherit or somebody to set you up. So I went to college because they persuade everybody to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
I went to school for ag mechanics, and I went to a John Deere specialty class because if you're going to go to college, you might as well go for the whole bang for your buck.
Okay.
So anyway, I went to college and graduated from the John Deere Ag Tech program. Really great program. If you're thinking ag mechanics at all, I would definitely look into the Ag Tech John Deere program. When you graduate, you're a full certified John Deere ag mechanic. You can go anywhere in the country. They'll hire you on the spot. But anyway, as things persuaded, I went to school, and through the program, you're supposed to have like a mentorship, sponsorship dealership. Well, our local John Deere dealer just got bought out the year that I was supposed to go to college, so they kind of dropped me in the transition. So a neighboring dealership picked me up, and I think they had 8 stores, and they ended up hiring 6 of my classmates. And that kind of left me out to dry since they picked me up. They didn't really want to hire me on.
Okay.
So I took the advantage, and I went out west and ran combine on a wheat crew.
Okay.
And we started in Oklahoma and ran all the way to northern Colorado. And then most crews go on to like Montana. We ended up going south into the San Luis Valley in Colorado, and we combined barley. It was grown specifically for Coors.
Okay.
And I got to learn quite a bit about, the barley aspect of it. And after we got done there, we shot back into Kansas for fall crops. We combined a lot of corn, and then we did a little bit of milo or sorghum, as most people know it. I did that twice. I worked with a small guy. He only had 2 9660 John Deere combines, and they all had, when I started, they had like 5,000 hours on them. And when we quit the second year, they both drove out of the field about 6,200 hours or something like that. So that guy owned them for like 6-7 years. Every winter he'd come back and put all new parts on them, and we'd run them another year. But I just love that life. But I mean, you're gone 6 months out of the year. That first year, I left. I graduated in May, and I left the 1st of June to meet this. It was cob harvesting out of Russell, Kansas, and I drove, I think it's 700 miles one way, and just on a, he said he hired me, but you know how that goes. Sometimes you never know who the boss is or how things are going to match. So I drove 700 miles to Russell, Kansas, and met up with him, and I didn't come home that first year. We left Thanksgiving, like the day before Thanksgiving. I got back home, so it was quite a time commitment, that's for sure. But the places you go, the people you see. The interesting story is we were out in Johnson, Kansas, and if anybody knows that area, there's in 2001 there was a barrel racer, Dolores Tooley, and that was where she was from. The actual name of the town was Manor, Kansas. It was a population of like 20 people.
Okay.
But yeah, and that was we always said we were in a one-horse town, and the horse was famous. But anyway, so I wanted to get back to the rural community because I love Southwest Wisconsin area, and I just miss my family. And being part of the 4-H, I always missed the county fair when I was out west.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to stay closer to home. So when I got back, I tried mechanicing. I did work for a subcontractor at John Deere in Dubuque. They put add-on parts to new John Deere equipment, and I did that for a year, and I just missed the farming. It was more of construction, and you were dealing with the salesmen and business owners, and you just didn't have the heart-to-heart of the farmers.
Mm-hmm.
So I left there, and I went to my local Case IH dealership, and I worked on skid loaders for a year there. And that was fun. I enjoyed that. I got to work with farmers every day, and sometimes days were better than others, and it just got to be where I loved the dealership. I just wasn't going anywhere. You're putting your hours in for the man, and you got nothing to show for it but a paycheck at the end of the day.
Right.
So I was always looking for an opportunity to get back into farming, and an opportunity came along, and so I bought some cows, and I bought some beef cows, and I rented some pasture ground. And at the end of the summer, the pasture wasn't working out or going to work out the next year. And so I went to sell my cows, and the guy I sold the cows to kind of stiffed me on some money. So that was my first hard lesson in farming. And that one hit kind of hard because I paid for it for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And and I mean, it's just one of those, how they say lessons learned by the pocketbook are the most important lessons.
Yeah.
So I quit the dealership to go work for a farmer full time, and that guy kind of screwed me around. He was a organic hay farmer
Mm-hmm.
and grain farmer, and that was the year of the drought, and things just really slowed down, and he knew I had my CDL, so he sent me trucking, and that really wasn't what I wanted to do. So I left there, and I went hauling milk or off the farm, a milk truck driver, and that was interesting. I really enjoyed that. You got to work with all the farmers, and you knew you were well appreciated because that's how they got paid for every
Right.
ounce of milk you took to the plant. So they pretty much respected you very well. And there was a lot of long hours and busy days, and I wanted to get back into farming, so I tried farming again. And that time I was working for a guy, and there was no option to buy in, and we were putting in long hours. Me and a coworker of mine were racing to see who could have more hours every week, and
Mm-hmm.
it was averages of 100 to 125 hours a week.
Oh, that's plenty.
So, yeah. Yeah, that was back in my wild and single days, and so then I met my wife, and we started dating, and I slowed down a little bit and got back to the real world, and had to work a 9-to-5 job for a little while, and then the opportunity came along that I was working nights, and a buddy of mine ran a custom chopping crew. He did it for his dad and about a handful of other guys, and he needed help. So that fall, I ran one of his silage trucks for him and just fell in love with it.
Mm-hmm.
And from then on out, that fall, I worked for him all fall, and he's like, well, this co-op down the road's been trying to sell a straight truck, and they only want, I think it was like $1,000 for it. I said, well, you owe me money. I said, I'll put a little money with it, and what you owe me, we'll go buy that truck, and we'll put one together. And that winter, I found a cheap silage box to go on it that needed work. So that spring I went and took out a loan, and I got the box fixed up, and I built my first silage truck, and that's how the world got started, and I've been doing her ever since.
All right. Awesome. Now, what is the name of your business?
It was Cow Chow Express, but I kind of missed that opportunity, so I'm going to move her to Frankie's Feed Movers is what we decided on, me and the wife.
All right, very good. Well, you mentioned Wisconsin and all of that. I've got to talk about one of our great sponsors, and of course, very relevant to Wisconsin, everybody. Lacrosse Footwear. You can find them at lacrossefootwear.com. Of course, began in 1897 in La Crosse, Wisconsin. But since 1897, Lacrosse Footwear has been making quality boots for hunting, working and tending the land now over a century, well over a century, with some great history in there, including World War II. We use the Alpha Range boots right here on my farm in Idaho. Just slipped them off before I started this interview with Dan, and we use them every day, and we hope you will as well. Please make sure and check them out at lacrossefootwear.com. All right, well, Dan, so describe to everybody what a silage truck is and what you're doing, how the business functions.
Well, I have just a long semi that I guess, I don't know how many people are familiar, but a forage box it's got a front discharge, so you can unload from the front in like a bagger or a silo, or I had a front and rear combo, so I could unload out the back. Just has a floor chain, and it's pretty simple. I guess a silage box is what we call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just work with different farmers, or my buddy is a custom operator, and I drive through the field next to a chopper, and they blow the feed right into my box, and I take it wherever they want to bag it and dump it on their pile or in their bagger, whatever they have. They'll have some way of storage for it, and I'll just do that. There might be some days where I haul 10 loads, or there might be some days where it's 45. You never know what the conditions are, but...
Okay, so that was going to be my question for you. So you're on the front end of the process when they're chopping the corn and doing all of that. You're hauling all of that to where it's going to be turned into silage.
Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And so the farmers, they've got their own, they're bagging it, or they've got their own silage pits there on the farm. And then after, once the silage is ready to be fed, they've got all the equipment to be able to feed that off and to get that to the cattle.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so the business model for silage moving, for doing this, is it that the farmers don't want to own the equipment they need to haul the chopped corn out of the field, just because it's more equipment they would need to own to only use one time per year, so it's easier for them to hire somebody like yourself to haul it out of the field?
Well, a lot of it comes down to, and how my business is kind of based, is labor shortage.
Okay.
There is a huge, out here in farm country, there's a huge shortage of skilled laborers, and this is kind of why I went into buying my own truck. Is I was working with my buddy, and only, he might chop for 100 hours a year, while at, $15 an hour, you can't make a living on that, where, if I can own my own truck and charge the rates I need to live, then I can determine how many hours I need to work per year.
Okay.
So that's kind of the gist of it all. Is it's a labor base. I know I got one customer that they melt 2,500 cows, and they run couple thousand acres, and he's told me straight up, he's like, I can buy the trucks, I can buy the equipment, but I hire you to fill the need, the void, because, he calls me, he tells me a time, I show up on his farm, my truck's ready to roll. If it breaks down, it's my problem. He doesn't have to shut down the operation to fix it. It's just that it relieves a lot of the stress on the farmer, because you gotta $300,000 to $500,000 machine sitting there, you really don't want to shut it down to fix one little problem with one truck.
Yeah.
And you really can't afford to have a mechanic on site all the time if you're only milking, 100 or 200 cows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is interesting. So for your business then, you're very busy when it's time to chop corn, but what about the rest of the year?
Well, and that's the nice thing about I've built up I've worked for a lot of different people. I've learned a lot of skills, but I've also made contacts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of my stuff is networking. So like I got a customer that I helped chop, and he just bought his own manure truck,
mm-hmm.
and he needed a driver. So he calls me up, and then I just go drive his manure truck. It keeps me busy, but it also gives him an opportunity to have a guy that's skilled, but he doesn't have to try to find him full-time work.
Okay. So this is interesting. I wrote an article about something similar to what you're doing a while back, but I based it on a community that I'm familiar with down in Texas. And basically what I wrote about was in this community, there's a lot of opportunity for somebody who would like to live out here, live rural, they'd like to run cattle, whatever it may be, that there's all these people in this area who need help at certain times of the year with certain different projects, but there's nobody else out there filling that need. And so you see a lot of things kind of going into disrepair, and a lot of people, they're paying a lot more than they necessarily should because they got to bring somebody from 30, 40, 50 miles away to do this type of stuff. It sounds to me that you've kind of figured this out in your community that, hey, I'm good at what I do. I'm reliable, and people know me, and so I can fill all these different needs, and I can be out here, I can farm, I can live the life I want by doing all these different things to help people out.
Yeah, and that's I guess in this, it's got to be in the right economy because,
yeah.
I mean, if the economy's in a downturn and there's no jobs around, this model doesn't work. But in any given paper on any given day, there's 10, 15 jobs in the area.
Mm-hmm.
They're all fairly decent paying jobs. So that's what makes this business model work. And I mean, it all comes down to knowing
mm-hmm.
your community and knowing your economy and knowing your numbers. That's a big thing. You can't, a lot of like the small dairies and stuff, they don't pay as well as, somebody with a skill.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just going to settle for the cheap, flipping burger pay jobs, you're not going to get ahead in life.
It's interesting when you bring up the economy and the way the economy is going. Obviously, no matter how the economy is going, a dairy farmer needs their chopped corn to be hauled. They need their manure to be spread and hauled. I mean, that never stops. So what you're talking about is in an economy like this, there's so many people that have jobs that these farmers have a hard time finding folks to do the small tasks that you're doing.
Oh, yeah. And that's pretty much what it is.
Right. That's
the jobs are there. They just
right.
don't have the people.
The jobs are there, and they're paying well because they need people, and that's how they're drawing them in.
Yep.
Gotcha. So if unemployment were to go back up to, I don't know if it would be traditional levels or maybe an inflated level or something like that, and there was a lot of people looking for work, then your opportunities doing what you're doing right now would be somewhat diminished.
Yeah, well, I guess the way I look at it is you need something to supplement you because
mm-hmm.
in farm country up here, we run in cycles. You got your winter, your summer, your seasons. Well, if there's corn growing, you're not going to be out there spreading manure.
Right.
So, and the same thing goes along as if the corn's growing, you're not going to be chopping it. So you've got small windows. Like my corn chopping season runs 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
So that means I have 10 months to try to find, to make up my income gap.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where, like now I got a Class A CDL, and if I'm not running my own piece of equipment, I'll go work for a local trucking company hauling freight just to, make up my income difference. And that's where the economy comes into play because, I mean, you have to, like farming, you have to fill in your gaps. If you want to make $70,000 a year, well, if your farm only pays you 40, well, now you got to figure out how you're going to make that other 30,000 a year.
Right. So
go ahead.
It's interesting how you've built this, and I wanted to ask you about that. You talked about seeing jobs in the paper. So have you reached a point where you get more work by people calling you because they know you, or are you still responding to ads and things you're seeing posted out there in the paper or Craigslist or whatever that may be?
I have a lot. Right now, as of today, it's more of people are calling me. But when I first started, it was a lot of making phone calls, answering ads to work for different people. Just it's to get your name out there. I know this summer I hauled some feed for a guy. He's like, well, if I'd have known that you had a silage truck and that you were for hire, I'd have hired you a long time ago.
Right.
And I also see that with the farming the way it is, guys have to go farther to get more acres. So that's where, the trucks pay off, where I can haul feed 5 miles and half the time you can with your tractor and wagon.
Right. Now, that's interesting. And in terms of the silage hauling business, are you maxed out right now? Do you have all the work you can take while people are chopping corn, or do you have room to grow in that 2-month period still?
Well, as of right now, I've kind of about reached my max because I haven't expanded. I'm one guy with one truck. So I'm the sole driver. So I'm limited to, if I'm chopping here one day, I'm here. I can't, be going other places. But I think in the near future, I do have the possibility to expand the business if I could, a lot of it comes down to labor. If I could find another reliable driver that's skilled, I'd have no problem putting a second truck on the road. But
Gotcha.
That's where you start running into troubles when you start, expanding without the qualified people.
Yeah, and that's a double-edged sword because you need another rig and you need somebody you can rely on who's going to show up and stay sober and do all that type of stuff, right?
Yeah, and it's not like I can hire any driver off the road because when you're driving through the fields, you got different elements to deal with. You got hills and rocks and rough driveways, and it's a whole different game when you get off that pavement.
So when you look forward, how do you see that developing? Is that something you want to do, or is it just seem like it would be an easier thing just to stay just a single owner operator?
Well, and I've already kind of done this is I help other people get set up in the business that I'm in. When I started, it was just me and there's another guy that kind of does the same thing. But then since I've started, I've grown. I've helped 3 other people start doing the same thing that I'm doing.
Okay.
So I help them get a truck bought, give them some of my contacts, so that way they don't go starving, because that's the biggest issue out here is they'll work a year and find out that they don't make as much money, and then we'll lose them to a public sector job where they can be guaranteed so many hours a week at so much a year.
Yeah, so you're helping people not just get started, but understand the business and how to make it viable for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess that's the way I would rather see it grow, is if I can start, 5 other people all owning their own trucks and living and making a living at this, versus me owning 10 trucks and trying to get all the drivers and I guess keep them happy. That's what it comes down to, is trying to keep people.
So, well, let me ask you, if you're doing it that way, and I think it's great, by the way, that you're helping other people start their own businesses and get going, but how does that help you grow your business? Is there a revenue model there or a business model there?
Well, as of right now, I really don't charge like franchise fees or anything, but it also helps keep my customers happy.
Okay.
You know, it's where if I have one guy that needs 3 trucks today and I've only have one, he's going to try to look for somebody that's got 3 trucks that can help him.
Okay.
He wants to simplify his operation, where if I can supply him all 3 trucks, the next time he goes to chop, he's going to call me first.
Okay. And so you're taking in...
I guess...
So I hear what you're saying. So you're taking in still just 1/3 of the total cost for that day, but at least you're getting the job versus him hiring somebody that's got more trucks than you.
Yeah, and I guess I would rather see the farmer happy with what I've got as far as my network source than to try to go find somebody else and then cut me out of the loop completely.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you're networking in 2 different ways. You're developing a network of potential customers that can hire you to chop or to haul chopped corn, silage, and do other jobs, but you're also building a network of people that can come in and allow you to get those bigger jobs that you might otherwise miss out on.
Yep.
Okay, interesting. Really cool, Dan. Well, let's take one more second, everybody, just to acknowledge another great sponsor of the show. And, of course, you know I'm going to be talking about Powder River Livestock Handling Equipment. Just thrilled to have Powder River as such a long-term sponsor of this show. They make absolutely fantastic livestock handling equipment, whether that's a squeeze chute you need, an alleyway, a sweep tub, panels, whatever you need to handle your large livestock. Nobody does it better. I've been to their factory. I've seen the way they build, seen the way they weld, the grade of metal they use. I mean, it's just fantastic what they're doing right out here in the West, and we hope that you will let your local farm and ranch retailer know you'd like to see those Powder River products right there in their yard. So you've got the opportunity to purchase the finest livestock handling equipment out there as well. You can check them out at powderriver.com. Okay, so Dan, this is great what you're doing, and it's funny because I sit here in my office interviewing you, and I'm trying to envision you training all these people, and it seems like nothing but benevolence. But no, there's a really valid business reason to doing this. You guys, it's almost like a cooperative. You guys can all combine forces to make sure you get those jobs.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it has been. I know I've got one driver right now that he bought on a year and a half after I did, and he kind of knows the trucking business and the custom harvesting business, and he just kind of works as our ringleader. We all just kind of communicate together, and we just have like a group message and be like, this operator needs so many trucks tomorrow. Who's available?
Okay. Gotcha.
And that's how 50% of our growth comes along.
That is really interesting. Now, there is potential there for sure, depending on how big of an area you can serve. I've got a client called bulkloads.com. I don't know if you've ever listened to any of their podcasts, but they talk about bulk freight shipping in agriculture. And I help to consult and produce and edit their podcasts, and we got them started with that show. But what's really interesting about their business is they're coordinating bulk freight haulers all over the United States, helping match them up with loads that are available, going from point A to point B, then coming back from point B back to point A or whatever that may be. It's a very, very interesting business. But what you're talking about doing is you're kind of doing a similar thing to that on a smaller scale. As I sit here, not ever doing what you're doing, but just envisioning it, it makes me wonder about expanding that part of it. Like, is this something that could be done for all of Wisconsin and Iowa or something like that? Some sort of a network of people with this business where you can match them up with jobs that are available and find available trucks and things like that to go out and help people when it's corn chopping time or whatever the need might be. Maybe it's custom harvesting or something like that.
Oh yeah, and there's different groups that kind of already do that. And I mean, I don't like to, I guess, reinvent the wheel. If somebody's already
right.
mastered at that, let them have at it.
Sure.
I'm just one guy out here trying to make a living for my family the best, most efficient way that I can.
Yeah.
And that's, as far as my business goes now, that $1,000 truck that I bought, it lasted me, I just got rid of it this fall.
Okay.
And I plan on building a brand new one this spring. And it's one of those things where I had to get my feet wet with a low cost machine. And then now that I know the business, I've expanded, or I've upgraded, I guess.
Yeah.
And now I hope to break into hauling commodities in the winter.
Oh, fantastic.
So that's the biz. That's when you ask me about growth. I guess I'm kind of booked for my silage season, but I'm looking to try to make this truck, work year round.
Right.
Is the way that I would like to see it.
Well, and that's great. I was going to ask you about that, if there was something else you could do with your truck when chopping season was over, but since you're upgrading equipment, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yep.
That is great.
And I mean, it comes at a little bit of a cost, but when you weigh them costs, I mean, it almost pays for itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Now, if somebody out there is listening, they're sitting down in Oklahoma or whatever, and they're going, well, this is an idea. This is something that maybe I could do. What advice would you have for them getting started? Like, what are some of the things that maybe you did wrong that you wouldn't do again? Or if somebody asked you, you'd go, well, make sure you don't do this. What are some of those pieces of advice?
I guess market research is the main thing. I guess everything I've come to is you got to know your markets. You got to get out there and ask the hard questions. I guess how my business got the big boost is I went up to the largest farm that I know in our area, and I just went and I found the farm manager, and I said, sir, I'm buying my truck. I'm going to put this truck together. Will you give me some work?
Okay.
And it all depends on that answer to that question. If you can find that guy and they're, they give me probably a quarter of my work a year, but, that's a quarter of my work. Now that's only 3/4 that I have to go find.
Yeah.
And I will say it's always nice to have an ace in the hole. Whether, you got to have something to fall back on. If your business is not making what you need it to make, or things are going south, it's always good to, have somebody in the back door that you could fall back to or give you some help somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I really like the concept of kind of pre-selling your service before you invest the money. If you've got people saying, yeah, we will spend money there, or better yet, if you got people that will say, yeah, I'll spend money with you right now, and you provide it to me and you've got it either way, you're off to a very good start as compared to just complete speculation.
Yeah, and that's the main thing. You gotta have your ducks in a row before you start, because if you don't, you're setting your business up from failure from day one.
Now, you talked earlier about you can't hire just any driver because they're going to be driving, where there's rocks in bad conditions, bad driveways, things like that. So for somebody out there who's been driving, but they've been doing all their time on pavement, what advice would you have for them in terms of what kind of changes in their driving behavior or knowledge they need to be able to drive in the conditions where you do when you're out there hauling silage?
Well, I guess it all comes down to knowing your rig. I mean, with these silage trucks, most of our weight is carried. We got 10 to 12 foot sides, so most of your weight's going to be higher up. So you got to, as you're going across the hill, you got to know that, hey, I need to slow down, watch, if it starts to lean a little bit or something, you need to know learn when the feeling is that you need to get out of that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it kind of just comes with practice, but I guess it all comes down to knowing your machine.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main key there.
Yeah, you get a feel for that particular machine, so you know what it can take in terms of being on an angle or something like that.
Yep. You need to know how your
Mm-hmm.
machine operates in and out, and I mean that's with anything, I guess, is even farming in general. If you're gonna haul that tractor and manure spreader across the hill, you're gonna want to know kind of how to control it. If it starts pushing you,
Mm-hmm.
or what may be, you need to know what to do in case of that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Now, what about mechanics? If somebody's going to go into this business, can they afford to hire somebody to fix their truck if it breaks down, or they're going to have to do it themselves?
Well, you can, but that's where, if you're not very mechanically inclined, I wouldn't say to go out and get a used truck that, really know nothing about,
Mm-hmm.
and then think you're going to take it to the mechanic and you're still going to make money. Now, that's something where if you're not very mechanically inclined, you might be better off to make the initial purchase up front and buy something reliable that you don't have to work on. It's kind of one of the old sayings. Somebody gave me a piece of advice a long time ago. You're either making payments or repairs.
Yeah.
And that's how it boils down, is you're either making payments or repairs. One way or another, it's going to cost you money to be in business. So whether you can afford it or not, you got to tie that into your operating cost.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you're either buying something that you got to make payments on because it's reliable, but that means it's more expensive, or you're buying something used that you can pay cash outright for, but you're fixing it.
Yep.
Very interesting. I like that.
And I will say that along the way, I have worked at a few different heavy equipment garages and stuff, and that gave me the skills that I needed to do, most of the repairs on my truck.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. And so if somebody worked in a shop like that, they could be gaining some of the experience that will allow them to go out on their own.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. For me, that's what I would need to do. If this was a business that I wanted to go start, the business aspect of it, the finding customers, the providing good service, the being on time, the operating the vehicle, all of that is stuff that I feel like would come much easier to me than repairing it. So for me, it would be a good idea for me to start off trying to work in a shop and get experience fixing these things before I went out and went on my own. So I guess it's all a matter of where your skill set is, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. When I run my truck, I barely have any downtime. But I went through and stuck the big investment in, and when I bought my box, I went and had it rebuilt front to back. So that way, I eliminated the problems, and if a problem arose, I had enough knowledge that I could fix it on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I always carried an extra set of tools and I guess a few extra parts that I would think would break. If I needed them, then I could be up and running in no time versus losing a half a day's worth of work because I needed to go fix something.
And when you're billing the farmers, are you billing them like per load, or is it per hour? How are you doing that?
Most of the time it's per hour.
Okay.
I mean, I work with the farmers since, well, I guess that's the other advantage of being the business owner. I know what my costs are, so I know what I need.
Okay.
So if the guy's chopper breaks down and I'm charging him by the hour, if I had a guy in the seat, he's going to charge him straight through. Whereas me as the business owner and operator, I can be like, well, since your chopper was down for an hour or so, I'll just deduct that from my bill.
Okay. But of course, that's an hour that you can't be hauling silage for somebody else.
Yes. I mean, that's just something that I have to eat.
Right.
But, that all comes back to if that customer sees that I'm willing to do that for him,
right,
he's more likely to call me back in the future.
Absolutely. Now,
I guess that's the main important thing to take away is you know, a happy customer will call you back.
That's
if
right.
You're just going to bill him through the nose right now and not look for the future. You're not going to have much of a extended period in this business.
Yeah, you'll get that job one time, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's another piece of advice, I guess, that somebody gave me a long time ago is your first impression is what's going to sell you.
Yeah.
You know, you only got one shot at trying to win that guy's business, and if you screw it up on your first try, he's not going to give you a second.
Well, now let's switch it around then. So you're talking about when the farmer's choppers broke down for an hour, and so you're kind of sitting there, you're not making any money. Now you're broke down for an hour, and you're not able to haul silage for him for an hour. What do you do in that case?
Well, then you really can't charge the guy for it because you're not working.
Right.
You know, and that's kind of another reason why I'm the guy in the seat. So that way, if I do break down, I can get it fixed and I can adjust the bill. You know, so if I had somebody, just a truck driver sitting in my seat, and he throws a chain off or something, and he doesn't know how to fix it, so it's going to take time for me to get there from whatever I was doing to fix it for him, and then to get him up and going. That's time lost. That's dollars lost. That's an unhappy customer.
Yeah, what an interesting business. Well, Dan, this has been fascinating. I've really enjoyed learning about it. If somebody out there listening, if they would want to learn more, they would want to ask you a question or something like that, how would you want them to go about contacting you?
Well, you can feel free to call me. My number is 608-792-3047. I take questions year-round, every time of the day. I do have an email or Facebook. My email is rabbitking01@yahoo.com. I got Facebook. I'm on Instagram. You know, just normal social media sites. Just Dan Frank. You should be able to find me pretty easy.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for reaching out to me and being willing to share this with us today. I think this is really, really valuable.
Yeah, and I like listening to your show. You know, I'm a young farmer trying to get into agriculture, just like a lot of Americans out here are. And, you know, every bit helps. You know, if we can all stick together, we can make this world a better place. That's for sure.
Well, thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on our YouTube channel. And as always, enjoy your journey to the ultimate lifestyle business, agriculture.